Welcome to the deep dive. We tackle those really complex, often misunderstood topics and try to give you the keys to unlock them. Today, we're diving deep into the world of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's a movement that's not just history, it's absolutely critical if you want to understand the modern Middle East. And maybe surprisingly, it's a big factor in U.S. foreign policy, too. Our sources show it's not just one thing, it's like a living paradox. It forces these huge strategic choices on global powers, and those choices, they actually ripple right back to you. So our mission today, unpack the nuances, look at its origins, its global reach, and really figure out why it's such a persistent, thorny problem for Washington. I mean, where do you even start with an organization that seems to be so many different things to so many people?
That's exactly the challenge, isn't it? What's really fascinating is just how differently it's interpreted. It totally depends on who's looking and from what angle they're looking. It's full of these surprising paradoxes. And getting those nuances is absolutely key to understanding why it's such a persistent issue for policymakers everywhere.
Okay, right. Let's unpack this right from the start then. The Muslim Brotherhood, or Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun, it wasn't some ancient thing. It was founded pretty recently, actually, 1928, in Egypt, by a young school teacher, Hassan al-Banna. Our research shows he was deeply worried about what he saw as the moral decline, the political decline of Muslim societies, especially with all the influence from colonial powers and these new secular ideas popping up. His mission was really ambitious. The sources lay it out pretty clearly. First, revive Islamic values, make them the foundation for, personal life and for how the government runs. Second, push back against Western cultural domination. And fundamentally, establish a society where the Quran and the Sunnah, they weren't just spiritual guides, they were the ultimate constitution.
Yeah. And what really stands out there right from the very beginning is how the Brotherhood wasn't just focused on spirituality. It uniquely blended that religious revivalism with, well, direct political action. That integration from day one really set it apart from other groups at the time, and it explains a lot about where it ended up today.
That blend, yeah, spirituality and activism. It set a fascinating course, didn't it? From those beginnings, the Brotherhood really changed. It started out very grassroots, building schools, setting up hospitals, creating welfare networks in communities, basic stuff. But over time, it grew into this powerful political force, and a transnational one, too. What's really striking, and I think often misunderstood, is how decentralized it is. There isn't one single headquarters pulling all the strings for every branch, everywhere. Our sources really show this well. It's more like a loosely connected network across so many different countries. You've got Egypt, obviously, where it started, but it's banned there now. Then you look at Jordan, operates legally, right, in the political system. Palestine, of course, Hamas actually grew out of the Brotherhood there. Tunisia, you have the Ennahda Party, and its influence goes even further. Sudan, Libya, Syria, the list goes on.
Right, and this decentralized structure has huge implications for how it actually works on the ground. Because there's no central command, you end up with branches doing wildly different things. Some, like you said, are all about social programs, running in elections. Very mainstream, in a way. But others, within that same broad umbrella, have openly backed armed resistance. This is exactly why trying to paint it with one brush, treat it as a single entity, is just really misleading, potentially even problematic.
It's fascinating looking through the research just how differently the Brotherhood is seen. I mean, how can one group be labeled a terrorist organization by some governments and then seen as a totally legitimate political player by others? What explains that huge gap?
It really is a huge gap, and it seems to boil down almost entirely to geography and political context. So, for instance, you take countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, they've flat out declared the Brotherhood a terrorist group. No ambiguity there. Why? Well, they see it as a direct political threat, a challenge to their monarchies, to their established regimes. It questions their fundamental power.
Okay, so that intense opposition really shows how disruptive the Brotherhood can be to the status quo in some places. But then on the flip side, you've got countries with a completely different perspective, right? Like Turkey and Qatar. They seem much more supportive, or at least tolerant. What's the thinking there?
Well, our sources suggest they see it strategically. It's a useful counterbalance to those Gulf monarchies you just mentioned. Plus, there's often a shared alignment on the idea of political Islam itself. So yeah, it's definitely not a uniform view across the region. And these different takes create a really complex landscape for Western powers trying to navigate it all.
Which brings up a big question for Western countries, doesn't it? Especially the US and the EU. They seem really divided internally on how to deal with the Brotherhood. It feels like they're torn. On one hand, counterterrorism is a huge priority, and some factions are linked to violence. But on the other hand, there's sometimes a pragmatic need to maybe engage with Brotherhood-linked groups for diplomacy.
Exactly. And connecting this to the bigger picture, this is precisely what turns it into a kind of geopolitical chess game. Every move, every decision about how to engage or not engage has these knock-on effects across alliances, across regional stability. It's high stakes.
And that leads us straight into Washington's big problem, the enduring dilemma, to designate or not to designate. For the U.S., the Muslim Brotherhood is it's a really tough nut to crack because it looks like both things at once, a security concern and maybe possibly a strategic asset. So the debate in Washington, it really seems to circle around two main questions. First, is it actually a terrorist group? And our research acknowledges, yeah, some factions, Hamas is the obvious example, they have links to violence, definitely. But then you have other branches running in democratic elections saying they reject violence, so it's not black and white. The second question is maybe even trickier. Okay, even if we could designate the whole thing, what would that actually achieve? What's the strategic gain versus the potential fallout?
Well, slapping that terrorist label on the entire movement, it would certainly make allies like Egypt and Saudi Arabia happy, no doubt about that. But, as our sources point out pretty clearly, it would also cause major friction with Turkey and Qatar. And both of those are really important partners for the U.S. NATO ally, in Turkey's case, key regional base in Qatar. And historically, the U.S. has kind of played both sides with the Brotherhood over the years. It's not new. Back in the Cold War, the Brotherhood was strongly anti-communist, which sometimes lined up with U.S. goals. More recently, remember the Arab Spring. Washington was openly engaging, especially during that brief Morsi presidency in Egypt.
So historically, the U.S. has kind of kept these options open. Strategic ambiguity, maybe. But what does the strategic analysis in our sources say now? What's the real cost-benefit calculation of designation versus non-designation today?
The analysis is pretty blunt, actually. It says, look, the Brotherhood is not monolithic. That's the core point. Treating it as one single thing is a massive oversimplification. You've got this diverse network, everything from peaceful political parties to actual militant groups. What we found suggests that banning it entirely could seriously backfire. I mean, in a lot of these countries, the Brotherhood is one of the few organized ways people can express opposition. If you outlaw it, you might just push members underground, maybe toward even more radical groups. You could create new problems. But on the other hand, not banning it, that has costs too. Your Gulf allies. They definitely see that as the U.S. basically tolerating a threat to their regimes, and that could damage crucial intelligence sharing, economic ties, you name it. So from a purely sort of realpolitik view, the smartest U.S. move, according to our material, might actually be to stay in that ambiguous space, neither fully embracing nor fully banning, using the Brotherhood almost as leverage maybe in regional talks to get concessions from different sides.
Okay, so why does all this matter to you, listening right now? You might be thinking, okay, complex Middle East issue far away, but it's really not that distant. This whole web, it touches directly on your national security. Groups linked to the Brotherhood have targeted U.S. allies and interests. That affects decisions about where security resources go. It also connects, believe it or not, to your wallet, how Gulf states react to U.S. policy that can directly nudge global oil markets, energy prices. And finally, it really shapes counterterrorism strategy overall. How the U.S. decides to categorize the Brotherhood sets a precedent. It influences how your government defines and deals with other ideological movements globally, how it responds to future threats.
That's absolutely right. This is definitely not just an over-there kind of problem. It's really about how the United States navigates the long game in arguably the world's most volatile region.
Yeah.
And that has direct consequences for alliances, for global stability. Consequences that ripple outwards and touch global politics and economics in sometimes surprising ways.
So it's crystal clear. The Muslim Brotherhood is incredibly complex, and the situation it creates for international relations, it's deeply challenging. It's definitely not a simple case of friend or foe. So here's a final thought, something provocative for you to mull over. If Washington eventually decides, okay, we're labeling the entire Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, that would be a huge political statement, a dramatic move. But it would also be a massive strategic gamble.
Or, as the analysis suggests, maybe the smarter play is to keep it deliberately in that gray zone, where it can be used as either a potential bridge or maybe a bargaining chip, depending entirely on what U.S. interests look like at that specific moment.
We hope this deep dive has given you a better sense of why these kinds of nuanced foreign policy choices have such far-reaching effects, globally and even, sometimes, right here at home. Keep thinking about how these seemingly distant issues really do connect back to your world.